Hi, folks. This is Bob Backus, as the legend says, and I've been doing this show for a long time. Tonight, I'm forced to say, unhappily, that my good friend and co-host, Mike Farley, is not going to be able to join us. He was planning to be here via Skype. He apparently has some problem in his house with some water. You don't want to hear that, but if you're a homeowner, but that's why he's not going to be joining us tonight. And I'm especially unhappy he's not here because I have, I think, an outstanding guest to join me tonight, and I hoped it would be both of us, and that's our new police chief, Alan Aldenberg, chief of the Manchester Police Department, one of our major governmental services in this city, as it is communities throughout the state and the nation, is police. They proudly say their object is to protect and to serve. And we all depend on the police in so many ways we probably don't even know. And so it's a real pleasure to have the chief join us. I guess this is your first appearance on one of these shows since you become chief in October, is that right?
It is, Bob, and I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I really appreciate your accepting my offer. It means a lot. I think part of the policing part of policing agenda for your administration is reaching out to the community, and we like to think we're contributing to that. Chief, first of all, not having met you before tonight, which I'm very glad I did, I'd like to use, if you're willing to, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got into police work, what sort of jobs you've had, and then we can get into talking about your goals and issues you think you face going forward as the chief.
Certainly. I grew up in Massachusetts, and I came to New Hampshire in like 1997, 1998. Started my career over at Goffstown PD.
Oh, really?
I did.
That's my hometown.
Oh, is it really?
It is.
I left there in 2003 and came over here to Manchester PD. Since I've been at Manchester PD, I've served many years in the patrol division, canine handler. I was a detective for a period of time. I worked in the legal division. I was a sergeant in the training unit, responsible for recruiting and hiring and in-service training for all officers. When I made captain, I commanded the patrol division for about 2.5 years under Chief Capano.
Yes.
And then upon his retirement, I was fortunate enough to be selected by the mayor to become the chief. I have another career. I've been in the military, the Army, United States Army, for 28 years.
Really?
I'm in the Massachusetts Army National Guard. I'm a colonel down there. Have a handful of deployments under my belt. Iraq, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, Afghanistan. I've done many domestic operations with the Guard, most notably Katrina, following the hurricanes down there. So I have a vast amount of experience in the military, which I think is applicable to police work as well.
I certainly think it is, and a lot of officers have that background. We have a caller.
That already.
And we are always glad to welcome our callers. Hi, caller. You're on the progress report with our new chief. Are you got a question or comment you'd like to participate with?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Bob. I got a couple of quick questions for the chief.
Okay.
Hey, this new training that the officers are receiving, I understand it's going from 8 hours a year to 40 hours. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So is that going to be overtime for the officers?
No, it's not. Historically, in the police budget, there's been money budgeted for the usually 6 to 8 hours a year that the officers would get overtime for the use of force training.
All right.
So when
It's not going to be overtime. Is that going to be less time that they're going to be patrolling?
No. What we do is we don't. The program runs from. We started it in February, and it's going to run until November. So we're spreading it out through the entire year. And there's only a certain amount of officers per week that are in the training, and from every division is covered in that training to make up that week. So for instance, we're not taking 20 patrol officers off the street to attend this week-long training. So there'll be no impact to the coverage within the city. And it's a cost-saving measure as well.
So it's not going to be overtime, and it's not going to impact coverage. I don't really see how that works out, but let's move on. When we see things like officers are going to be trained in de-escalation, right?
Yes.
It seems like it's presented to the people like it's this new thing. Isn't de-escalation automatic. Isn't it true that 99.9% of the officers obviously want to de-escalate a situation? I mean,
Yeah, you're spot
that's
on.
obvious, isn't it?
Yeah, you're spot
Are we
on.
reinventing the wheel here?
No. I mean, you're absolutely right. And we've been training for years to de-escalate, right? You always want to handle the least amount of force on any call for service. That's the goal.
Yeah.
You know, the old term verbal judo, right, that I learned in the academy back in
Yeah.
1998. Now we're just taking it to the next step. All right, we're just introducing, you know, maybe some different techniques, some different equipment. Just trying to be as progressive as we can in that arena, just so we're not reverting back to the same old training, just some additional progressive training, that's all. Same concept, just taking
All
it to
right.
the next step. You're right.
One more thing. You've got an interesting career. You've accomplished a lot in the Army, National Guard, and you spent a lot of years as patrolman. Honestly, when you see things like training and implicit bias, what goes through your mind when you think about your experiences out on the street patrolling, all the dangers that police officers face, and you hear about training and implicit bias? Do you say to yourself, "Come on, this is ridiculous"?
I don't think it's ridiculous. I don't. You know, law enforcement has changed, right? I mean, the young men and women on my PD now are dealing with things that day in and day out that to a much higher level or degree than I had to when I was on the street. The calls for service, the amount of violence out there, the mental health, the opioid epidemic.
I know. I get all that.
Yeah.
That's what makes the whole implicit bias thing ridiculous. Your officers have a lot of real life things to deal with. They don't need to bother with implicit bias.
No, it's not. It's not a bother. We're just making them aware of it, right? And making them more tuned. It helps us to tune in more to the community and get the community's perspective about how they react to how the police present themselves and how we react to how they present themselves. It's just kind of looking at everything through a different lens. We really don't give it a lot of thought. It's an important topic, but it doesn't bog us down from day to day. I can tell you that.
All right. Thanks for your service. Take care.
I appreciate the call.
Thank you for calling. Okay. You know, he brought up something I wasn't aware of, a major increase in police hours of training. Is that what you were talking about?
Yes, that was a result. But we had been planning to do it under Chief Capano. It was a concept that my training sergeant had brought forward, and then with the transition of Chief Capano retiring, me coming in, it's something that we've been able to implement. And and you saw it in the Governor's Lee Act Commission, the 48 recommendations that they came up with. So it was, I think they, without having it in front of me, they wanted at least 24 hours of annual in-service training.
Yeah.
We have the opportunity at Manchester PD where we have a lot of the majority of the resources in-house where we can train our people, and we've brought in some outside people as well, but we're fortunate, so we rose it to 40 hours, and that's the minimum.
That's quite impressive. I mean, that's a big increase from what
It
was
is.
happening before.
And it's been well received by the officers.
And I was not aware of that, so I'm really glad you got to, and thank our caller for bringing that up. So I wanted to maybe next go to well, first of all, you told us everything you wanted about your own personal career to becoming the chief of police here, your military career and your police career. I mean, anything else you'd like to tell us about?
No, I'm a pretty modest guy, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay, that's nice to hear too. I wanted to talk about this thing we hear about called community policing, which sounds like a really good thing. But isn't the policing always been? What is actually community policing, and how is that different from what we've had in the past in terms of the police doing their jobs?
Community policing it's been a concept that's been around a long, long time. We're fortunate we have a community policing division made up of approximately 15 officers, from the mountain unit to the area officers to the housing officers, elderly services, those type of officers are in that division. But community policing needs to be a department-wide philosophy. It can't just fall on the shoulders of 15 people in one division that they only do community policing. So what I've reorganized the department in a fashion that merges community policing with with my traffic unit, so we call it community affairs now. But what we're going to get back in the business of coming out of COVID is, hopefully, is getting the area officers engaged with my patrol division, and then they can see what the area community policing officers are doing, and getting back into the business of holding in-person community meetings in every part of the city.
So,
So we can hear, what the real issues are at the ground.
so does community policing involve the officers living in the communities they serve? Is that part of it?
No, I mean, some do.
Some
I mean,
do.
I do.
Yeah. But it does involve community meetings. And I think under a prior chief, and I can't remember which one, there was a policy of having your patrol officers handing out cell phone numbers to the community members. Is that?
Yeah, all the community policing officers have department phones where the people in their areas, whether it's north end, south end, east side, or west side, those people have those officers' cell phone numbers.
Yeah.
So we're trying to do more in the, it's not just the residential communities, right? We have a role to play in the business community as well.
Yes.
In the quality of life issues downtown.
Yeah.
And where we have a responsibility relative to police matters. Yeah, we're working at it every day.
As you come up through the ranks to now being the chief here, what are the major changes you've seen in the role of the police in the community?
The police officer, the patrolman of today, has to have many things on his tool belt.
Many skills.
Many skills. Sometimes a mental health counselor.
Yep.
A parent when they go to a call. You got a call coming in?
I got a call coming
All right,
in.
let's take it. That's probably more exciting than me.
It is. Hey, caller. Welcome to the Progress Report. Happy to have you join us and our new chief, Chief Aldenberg. If you've got a question or a comment, we'd like to have you contribute.
Yeah, hi, Chief. Thank you for coming onto the show.
How are you?
Good, sir. I have a question, sir, about protecting yourself at your residence. Like somebody comes after you in your home, your apartment. Do you have a right to protect yourself?
Yes, you always, in a sense, stand your ground. You just within reason. I'm not going to get into the particulars of every
Sure.
incident, but yes, somebody enters your home unlawfully, and if you have to, take actions to a certain degree to protect yourself, then absolutely.
Okay. Okay, that's what I want to know, sir. Like I said, thank you for coming on the show, and I've been born in Manchester, and I just want to thank you for coming on the show this evening.
Thanks for the call.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it.
Yes, thank you, caller.
You got a big following, Bob.
I think you're a guest that's attracting this following. I hope this calls continue. So we were talking about community policing, and what is the major thing that distinguishes community policing from traditional police work before we began to use this phrase? What is it? Is it the community
It's
meetings?
just a deeper engagement.
A deeper engagement.
It's a deeper engagement,
Yeah.
and identifying problems in particular areas of the city where the community policing officer has more time to dedicate to that issue, as opposed to a regular patrolman who's going from call to call to call.
Yeah.
So it's that deeper
I see.
engagement. yeah.
Okay, that's helpful.
Breaking it down further.
Yeah. Okay.
Problem solve. They're really good problem solvers.
Yeah.
Sometimes. We're not perfect.
We think of the many changes, and you adverted to some of them. I think the police have a broader and more challenging role than probably ever in the history of this country. Because you talk about, you're, in many ways, you're in the front line with mental health crises occur.
Drug opioid epidemic.
The opioid epidemic, obviously, which
homeless
is
issue.
homeless issue, all of these things. And the police are usually the first on the scene to deal with the immediate problem, and then have to funnel people to, providers who can provide more extensive and long-term care. Am I right about that? Is this is the new world? And is this new training is going to try and help your officers deal with these new roles, or these at least newly increased in importance roles that we've got?
Yeah, we try to give them as many tools that we can to predict what they may run into day in and day out.
Yeah.
Another one?
Yeah, we're having a great show here, Chief. You got to come back. Hey, caller, you're on the progress report with Chief Aldenberg and me, Bob Backus. If you have a question or comment, we'd love to have you participate. Go right ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you, Chief, for coming on the program. I've noticed since the COVID situation, let me preface this by saying I totally back the police. You go out there every day. You put your life on the line. You don't know what you're going to come into. You don't know if you're going to go home to your family. I totally am very supportive of the blue. But I am noticing, especially in the city of Manchester, that some of the basic laws and ordinances that we have are not being enforced. And I think if we could, my take on this is if we could enforce some of these basic premises, parking ordinances, for instance. The street I live on over on the west side of Manchester is like ridiculous with respect to that. Speeding ordinances, ordinances with respect to basic rights of pedestrians being able to cross the street and not, get mowed over. Yep. What thoughts do you have with respect to maybe giving some focus to these basic premises that are already on the books? That my belief is if we enforce these basic premises, we might be taking a step closer to having a more orderly city. And I'll hang up and listen. And thank you again for taking time to come on the program and discuss these issues.
Thank you. I appreciate the call.
Thank you for your call.
She touches on a good point. You take care of the little things. Sometimes they take care of the big things. Her comment in regards to parking or parking complaints or parking issues, we have a parking division here in the city.
They're pretty good at it.
They're pretty good. Do we have a role in enforcing parking tickets and those type of things? We do, but I'll be very honest with the caller. There's only so much time in the day to get to those ordinances that she mentions. The big confusion or the big misnomer with city ordinances is there's no bite to them. A lot of people don't know this. So I could issue you, Bob, a city ordinance for lounging in a doorway and give you a fine for $100. All right, if you don't pay it, there's no ramifications. Okay,
you don't get your dog license. Probably another example.
You don't. There's no ramifications over at district court.
Yeah.
So you don't pay it, you don't show up for the court date. Nothing happens.
Yeah.
So the frustration on the officer's part, right, is I keep writing city ordinances, keep writing them over and over to the same people, but there's no accountability on the back end. So it becomes this, why am I wasting my time?
Yeah.
In regards to the speed enforcement, pedestrian and crosswalk, that type of stuff, my traffic division, I have 3 full-time enforcement officers for the entire city that go out every day on the day shift and on the second shift and solely do traffic enforcement.
Yeah.
But again, there's only so much time in the day.
And when the call brought that, I had to think about the backlash against some of, I don't think this applies to Manchester at all, but some of our big cities, there was a feeling that this was targeting minorities when you get, into the, the squeegee people, washing, trying to wash your windows and you're driving through New York City or, someplace like that. And there was a big backlash against that. But there is also the factor, as you said, that, sometimes you solve the small problems, you're going to get a handle on the bigger problems.
Sometimes you do.
Yeah. So that's a real interesting call. Thank you, caller. One of the things I read about, Chief, and one of the reasons I was really pleased that you agreed to come on the show, and it looks like a lot of other people are pleased too, is you're going to push for more diversity in the force, and that's a big objective, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about that, the reason for it, and what diversity you're looking for.
It is. I mean, my my three main goals are the health and wellness of my officers, reducing violent crime, and recruiting. And then recruiting and retention is retention is becoming more and more difficult. I can touch on that if you want, but
Yes, I would like
recruiting,
you to, when you're comfortable, yes.
recruiting, and by that I mean, trying to get people in our police department that are a good representation of the community that we serve. All right, and that's difficult. If you look, we're somewhat diverse in the PD.
Yeah.
We can get better. So what we've done, actually we have our first meeting on it tomorrow, is we've developed a problem-solving team internally relative to recruiting. So we do a lot of things on social media, job fairs, go to colleges, military folks, but clearly we're missing something. So this problem-solving team, as we move along in it, will eventually bring in hopefully people from the community, back to the community policing concept, right? That can come in and kind of advise us, or hey, have you thought about doing X, Y, and Z to recruit this part of the community? And I think that's kind of the next evolution of this, so we get a better representation of the community that we serve. It's a challenge, not just, I think it's a challenge New Hampshire-wide, due to the makeup of the state, if you will.
Yeah.
But we can't use that as an excuse.
Yeah. When I was growing up in Goffstown, which I understand you were on the police force there, after English, the most commonly spoken language in the city was French. Today, it's Spanish.
There's a lot of others.
We have a lot of Spanish speakers that have, migrated to the United States, and
a lot of other languages.
And a lot of other languages. I mean, the diversity of languages in our public schools is enough to knock your socks off.
But I think the diversity is what makes the city pretty great.
It should be considered an asset.
Right.
I mean, it's a wonderful opportunity to learn from these people, and God, we wouldn't want to just eat Yankee food or Irish food all the time. We want to we want to have the wonderful
You're right.
diversity we've got here.
Yep.
But how many are you seeking out Spanish speaking officers for your
And
force?
I have many of them.
And do you have many?
Yep.
That's
Yep.
good.
I have many officers that are bilingual in not just Spanish but other languages.
Really?
I have some that speak Russian. I
Yeah.
have some that speak Lebanese. I have some that speak Portuguese. And those officers get an additional pay rate after they take their language test through the city and prove that they are fluent in this language.
And how are you doing on gender diversity?
I just started a program. It's called the 30 by 30, and it's a nationwide program. We're the first department in the state of New Hampshire and within this region to sign on to this national program. So by 30 by 30, what they mean is by 2030, nationwide, the goal is to have 30% of every academy class will be females. I have 25 females in my department. When I came on the job, over here I probably had 5.
Really?
Right. So we've made progress.
You certainly have.
But there's more progress to be made, and of those 25, 2 are in supervisory positions. Right. So there's a gap there that we need to recognize.
Yeah.
So we're excited to be part of this program. We're going to see where it takes us. And we're not. And I want to be clear too. We're not changing the standards. The standards are the standards to get higher.
They still got to meet all the physical
Yeah, and they want them.
capability.
They don't want
requirements.
any. They don't want any.
They don't want any
handouts.
easy
No.
trips. Okay,
No.
that's good. Yeah, great. Well, that's very exciting. I'm glad to hear that too. And one of the things I sent to you, notice the things I might like to talk about. One of the things that strikes me as one of the most amazing changes in policing over my many years I've been watching is the use of body cams. And that seemed like it was going to be very controversial, but it seems to be rolling out quite well. Can you talk about where we are in body cams and how your officers are responding to this technology? And
I have mine on right now.
And oh my goodness, my picture's being taken.
No,
right
no, it's off. So the body cam just slides in here. It's about the size of an iPhone.
Yeah.
So it was kind of under Chief Willard, towards the end of Chief Willard, and Chief Capano kind of carried the ball to the goal line to get the program instituted with the help of the mayor and the Board of Aldermen, who were able to find the funding. Body cam programs are very expensive. It's not so much in the equipment, it's in the data storage.
Yeah,
So, cops don't like change, right?
right. Well, most people don't.
Most things, two things cops don't like, the way things are and change. All right? So, at every level within the PD, everybody was kind of, what's this about? What are they trying to do?
Yeah.
But we're finding now we're almost completing 2 years with our body cams. And the officers now, it's just a way of life for them. It's
So
just
is it universal throughout the force now that
every police officer, whether they're uniformed or a detective or wherever they work in the police department, they have their own body cam.
And does an officer on duty have an option to turn off the body cam for any reason?
You can mute if you're having the policy allows you can mute your body cam through your watch if you're having a private conversation that. So there are mechanisms built in. This also has mechanisms built in that we call them. Should you hop out of your car quickly and you engage in a foot pursuit and you don't have a chance to turn it on, that motion of running fast will automatically turn the body cam on.
Really? That's pretty interesting technology.
If you draw your weapon out of your holster, it will automatically turn the body cam on. If you have your cruiser lights on and you open the car door and you step out, the body cam automatically comes on. So these are things we built in to kind of take away the human error factor of the officer forgetting to turn it on. And then it also has an officer down feature. So if I fall down in the prone position and I'm in that position for more than 10 seconds, it sends an alert to everybody's body cam saying officer down, and then through GPS we're able to determine your location.
I hope this would never happen with any of your officers, and I truly want to believe it never would, but if there's going to be an incident where an officer's got in a confrontation with a minority member, and is there any, and I guess there may be some privacy issues involved with body cams too. Maybe they're not. But is there any requirement that these body cams be kept operating during any interaction with the public?
Yeah, the policy is any interaction with the public, any call for service, the body cam has to go on.
Has to go on.
Yeah, has to go on. Yep.
Okay.
Now, if I go into a convenience store to grab a coffee and I see you and you're like, hey, Chief, hi, Bob.
Yeah.
That doesn't require the body cam to come on.
Yeah.
You and I just two gentlemen having a conversation.
Okay, that's fine. Chief, we're all living through an unbelievable time with this pandemic. It's changed life for everybody, and I'm just wondering how it's affected your force. Has everybody on the force been fully vaccinated so that they can be a little more confident as they go about serving the public?
We didn't mandate it, and I don't think any PD mandated it. We're probably, percentage-wise, we're probably at, I'd venture to say 70 to 75% of the department is vaccinated.
Really?
Yep. And we also have a mandatory mask policy when they're inside the building, and that's a city policy.
Yeah.
That still stands. So we take a lot of internal measures to mitigate exposure as much as we can.
Have any of the force just said, I don't trust the science on this, I'm not going to get vaccinated?
Yeah, and we respect that.
And you respect that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, okay.
I mean, the stance is, who am I to tell them what they're going to put into their bodies,
I suppose.
right?
But there's the more people get vaccinated, the safer the rest of us are, I'm
Yeah.
afraid. Yeah. So what else has changed as a result of the COVID pandemic and the work you and your force do?
Early on, the pandemic, we had to take very early on, we had to, as an agency, we had to really take a step back and say, okay, what do we not need to be responding to? What can we handle over the phone to limit exposure, us to the public and vice versa? So there was a period of time where we, kind of slowed things down a little bit, really in regards to like proactive activity. And I think that was kind of widely accepted and appropriate. But we did reach a point as we, came out of the summer, early fall, where all right, we need to get back to police work.
Yeah.
And because it didn't take long, you could look around the city and start to see things that weren't there before because we were handling it and kind of rearing its head again.
Yeah.
And the police officers, to be honest with you, to their credit, they wanted to get back to work.
Yeah.
They wanted to get back to doing what they're supposed to be doing. So hey, wear your mask, wear your PPE, and do the right thing. And overall, as a police department, I had my cases, but not at very high levels at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
We're very pleased.
Yeah. Well, you can do a lot of things by Zoom, but there's an awful lot of police work you can't do by Zoom.
Yeah,
I'm
Zoom
sure.
gets old.
Zoom gets really old.
Yeah.
I'll say it does. You mentioned this earlier on, and I want to kind of come back to it, Chief. Where are you in terms of having the full complement of officers that you think you need to have in order to properly serve the city? And how are you doing on recruitment and retention?
So I currently have 12 vacancies. So come July, let me put it in perspective for you. Come July 1, my total authorized complement for police officers will be 267. I'm sure you saw the mayor's budget address last night. She was able to fund those final 10 positions. So over the last 3 years, we've increased our complement by 30. All right, so we do appreciate the board and the mayor doing that. Now it's on me to fill those.
Yeah.
And that's the struggle. All right.
Yeah.
So like I said, I have 12 vacancies. So come July, I'll have another 10. So between now and July, I'll do another hiring. I'll probably always kind of operate around that 10 to 12 vacancies because you have retirements that they happen. The issue, I'll be very honest with you. I mean, I just gave a test this past weekend, a police entrance exam. 50 people signed up, 32 showed up. After the physical fitness, the written exam, and the oral interview that were conducted yesterday, I'm down to 22. Out of that 22, I'll be lucky if I hire 5 after we do all the other background process, right? So the big, when you look back historically where, you would hold a police exam for this department and you would get 700 people, 1,500 people would show up.
Why are there so much fewer? Is it the demographic change we're seeing in this state? Or
It's
is it more
the
than that?
narrative on law enforcement.
Yeah.
Right? That's, to me, is unfair to this region of the country.
Yeah.
In particular, the state, in particular, Manchester PD. I'm not saying we're perfect, but in the things that have happened across the country in the last year and a half to 2 years, right? That has a sweeping effect across the country on law enforcement. So you have that problem. You have the fact that, back in, was it 2011, 2012, the state changed the retirement system, right? So you used to have a 20-year retirement system that many people signed up for, and then, halfway through the game, the state changes the rules on many officers at my PD and say, you now have to work 25 years to get into the age of
get your
50
full pension,
to get your retirement.
Yeah.
So it's all those things eventually add up to the point where a lot of young men and women are saying, you know what, what's the point? And now you have at the state and the federal level, they want to go after qualified immunity,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Do you think that's
it's a bad idea.
it's a bad idea?
Yeah, I mean, people,
But there is an issue about a police accountability. We have this enormous trial going on in Minnesota right now, and
Sure.
I'm sure that's very distressing to you to watch that.
It is. I've been watching
watch
it.
the video and hear about it initially, and now
Yeah.
watch the trial. It's got to be horrifying to you.
Yeah, and we're not condoning. But I'm not condoning the actions of that officer by any stretch. The whole knee on the neck thing. We have a policy here that forbids that. We have for some time. We forbid chokeholds are not allowed unless it's in a deadly force situation.
Yeah.
So the whole qualified immunity thing is not it's not a pass for police officers. If a police officer violates a solidified part of the Constitution, backed up by case law, and they violate that law or that constitutional issue, then they're going to be held accountable like they have been all along. Now, if you open up this qualified immunity, take it away, these frivolous lawsuits are going to inundate police departments across the country. And it's also going to chase people out of this profession. I am fully confident that if qualified immunity is taken away from law enforcement, and we're not the only ones that have it, right? But they're focusing on us. You take that away, more men and women will leave this profession, right? They got me. I got 24, 25 years on, right?
Yeah, you do.
The young men and women that are at 3, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, they may say, you know what, I'm not putting the future security of my family at risk for this job.
Yeah. But Chief, I practiced law for a long time in this city. I never did much criminal law. I did a little bit, but that was a long time ago. But yet when I look around the history of police interactions that ended up in a fatality, very few of those officers ever been held accountable in a criminal sense for excessive force. Maybe this trial in Minnesota will be an outstanding example, which seems to me like the evidence is pretty devastating against this officer.
Looks that way.
It does look that way,
Yeah.
but that's very, very unusual. And so there seems to me, maybe qualified immunity isn't the answer, but there does seem to me and by God, I want your officers to be, I don't want them to hesitate to do what they need to protect and serve and keep people safe in very trying circumstances. And I know it's unlike the military where you follow an order. Here you have to make the guy on the ground or the gal on the ground has to make an instantaneous decision when things may not be entitled. I understand all that, but is there a need for some mechanism for more accountability than what we have here now, for when the issue comes up that a police officer somewhere has exceeded his proper role and used excessive force and caused injury?
Absolutely. But we have it now.
Well, how do we have it?
We have it now. I have an internal affairs. I have a public integrity unit at the AG's office, right? I have an internal affairs division. So any civilian complaint that somebody comes and makes a complaint against an officer is investigated thoroughly. Whether that's a violation of a policy or whether it's somebody's making a criminal allegation against one of my officers. Manchester PD has a strong history of not only investigating these things thoroughly and properly, but when appropriate and required, we make the Attorney General's office aware.
Okay.
There's a few examples of that happening recently. So I think that Manchester Police is very transparent when it comes to that. And then we circle back with the person that made the complaint, and sometimes the complaint's been founded, sustained, or the officer's been exonerated. And all those files are maintained for, forever, basically. So the system's in place. And Manchester PD, we have held officers accountable and terminated them for inappropriate behavior and sometimes criminal behavior.
Okay, it's good to know.
So again, we want to, because other parts of the country perhaps are perceived as not doing it the right way, not holding officers accountable, does that mean every law enforcement agency in the country needs to then be punished?
Right.
Granted, if I wasn't investigating things properly that were, things that are brought up against my officers, if we had a history of not investigating those things, then I would probably agree with you.
Yeah.
But I do. And body cams have helped that tremendously.
I bet they have. I think
terms
that's a
of-
really great
Yeah.
great innovation, and I'm glad that this is winning acceptance with your force, and I guess many others around.
And it's getting rid of a lot of frivolous complaints too.
Yeah. So here's another subject I just mentioned to you briefly: bail reform. There's a feeling, and a lot of people in my congregation that I attend are very concerned about this. Nobody should be in jail just because they don't have the money to make bail, if that's the only thing that's keeping them in jail. And so we had this bail reform, but now I understand there is some problems and just interested in what you think, whether where we need to be or where there needs to be changes.
So the change they made, right, went really extreme, in my opinion. So we're not, as a chief of police or other chiefs that I talk with, we're not looking for people to be held in jail because they arrested for driving without a license, or they were driving on a suspended registration, or they were arrested for a disorderly conduct charge leaving a bar. Right? I think everybody agrees that those people do not need to be held over in jail. Okay. What we're asking for is the people that are repeat violent offenders, that commit a crime involving violence, get a 0 personal reconnaissance bail, get out. In many of these cases, domestic violence is involved as the underlying charge. Get out and reoffend. And eventually, it's got to stop. Right? What's it going to take? Somebody that's been bailed out 4 times, and then, God forbid, he or she ends up killing somebody? I had a case on the North End back in the summer or back in the fall where a gentleman is a convicted felon from Massachusetts and shoots off several rounds in the North End, and we make the arrest. That on scene, my officers make the arrest. Before they're even finished typing the paperwork, that gentleman was released on PR bail. So if those people aren't held, then what are we doing about public safety? Because that is it's unacceptable. And the minor infractions that you reference, I agree. But people that are repeat offenders on domestic violence and other crimes of violence need to be held.
Yes, I understand that, but if the fact is that a person with not just a minor offense, but maybe not the most egregious offense, is being held because she or he bail is announced. If they had the money, they could get out. If they don't have the money, they can't. Mm-hmm. That also seems wrong, right?
Well, they're not being held right now, right?
Okay.
I mean, most people are getting 0 PR bail.
Oh.
Right?
Okay. If you say so, I didn't know.
Yeah, and even if if somebody is held on, 250 cash bail for a driving related offense, or whatever it may be, they're going to have the opportunity to go to a bail hearing, in a relatively short period of time.
Okay.
And most times the judge then lets the person out.
Yeah. How do you think our criminal justice system is actually working? I mean, I understand that one of the major incubators of crime is people being in jail and coming out without any opportunities really to get a real job or find a place to live, particularly for some sorts of crimes.
Yeah, I think that's
how are you going to help reduce crime in this community?
Well, we've adopted. It's kind of the next evolution of. It's called CompStat 360. So we've recently started working with the National Police Foundation. It's free of charge. Subject matter experts that help us to attack the 3 things that I want to go after. The wellness of my officers, recruiting and retention, and the violent crime that you just kind of talked about. So it's kind of this wheel that keeps turning 360, right? It involves community and governmental partners. So they kind of give us strategies about how to involve people outside of the police department, business community, community leaders, religious organizations, whatever may be out there that wants to help us. So we gradually bring them in, and then they also help to say, okay, are you organized the right way to go after the problems that you want to go after? And then they will bring in subject matter experts to help us prevent and interrupt and solve crime. So that's the program that we're working on now. So all those 3 areas that I mentioned to you, they all kind of intertwine with one another. But the violent crime is, violent crime has come down, but it's still a concern. So we're taking many actions internally, not only Manchester PD, but we're involving our federal and other federal and state partners, FBI, DEA, ATF, state police, federal probation and parole, state probation and parole, to make sure that we're going after the right offenders and that it's evidence-based and it's not arbitrary. That the people that we're quote-unquote targeting that are committing the majority of our violent crime in the city.
How has the pandemic affected the rate of crime and the violent crime in this city? Is it made it worse or is it not?
We saw, in the beginning of COVID, we saw a slight decline, but it didn't take long to kind of come out of that. Your criminal element that's committing violent crime or dealing drugs within the city, either street level or your major dealers, I don't think they pay much concern to COVID.
Probably not.
I don't think it's part of their business plan. So.
And I think of the things that are different about policing these days, and we've touched on a number of them, but I think about the enormous effort that your officers had to put out to deal with the homeless situation. We had Camp Canal Street for a long time, up to I think the end of June last year. You had police presence there all the time to actually protect those people, and then. I guess can't say it's as you, except it was the former police station there on Chestnut Street, became a home for people. Can you tell us how you think we're doing with dealing with this homeless problem, and what you think the role of the police should be in addressing it?
And I early on in this whole homeless issue, it was kind of, call the police.
Right.
And I think with the mayor, the board, Chief Goonan over at Fire, Safe Station, there's a lot of opinions on that, right?
Yeah, by the way, Chief Goonan's announced his retirement.
Yeah.
We're going to miss that guy a lot. I'm
He's a
sure
good
you
man.
agree.
Yeah.
Terrific person for the city of Manchester.
Yeah,
But go ahead.
He's a good American. So we kind of got everybody on board. It's a collaborative approach to solve homelessness, right? There's the mental health aspect of it. There's the substance abuse aspect of it. There's the employment aspect of it, right? All of those things I just mentioned are not solvable by the police alone.
Right.
And there's an enforcement aspect to it. And kind of my community police division, kind of became like a homeless task force, right? Which is not what they signed up for.
Right.
But what we did find is they have they developed those 5 to 7 community policing officers that were kind of the main people on the homeless issue for us, developed a really, really good rapport with the homeless population. So it's, there's a human element of it, and then you have the element where some people will never go into one of your shelters, right? For whatever reason it may be.
Right, even in the middle of winter.
The middle of winter. They won't
middle
go
of
in
winter,
because of
you
mental health issues.
You can see them, their camps along the Merrimack River.
Yeah,
and
substance
stuff.
abuse, whatever it is, they're just not ready to go in.
Yeah.
So I think, now that the 2 winter shelters have closed, as of this morning at 10 o'clock, I think, we got to keep an eye on it now, right? Because where are these people going to go, right?
A little bit better for them not to be. I mean, it's a little bit more possible to be out camping on the outdoors now than.
But we don't want them in the parks,
you don't want
right?
them. You don't want them in the parks.
That's
right?
prohibited. That's a quality of life issue.
And then there's
right?
a big issue about the presence that they have downtown when our vibrant Elm Street, hospitality scene, and everybody's concerned about that. So
And that's a fair concern.
it is a fair concern. But then these are human beings, and you just can't ignore that they have certain human rights too. The opioid crisis, you don't hear about that so much with the pandemic taking up so much of the oxygen in the room, but it's still there, isn't it?
It's still there, yeah. And we have a lot of concerns about meth is making a comeback.
Really?
Fentanyl is still there.
Yeah.
Meth kind of takes people in a different direction, takes them more up. And with that up comes a higher propensity for violence on my officers, on the general public that may encounter somebody on meth. So yeah, my drug unit works hard day in and day out, all hours of the day, to take as much enforcement action as we can. But it's still there and still exists. But you're right. I think kind of COVID hijacked a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
Or the attention of a lot of things.
So what are your major objectives as you go forward? I hope you're going to have a long time to be our chief, because I think that'd be really great. But
As long as they'll have me.
well, I hope so, because we had a few chiefs that did not serve that long, and I think good stability would be good for us.
I always wondered though, what do people, how many years do people want out of a chief? You
Yeah.
know? Because eventually you wear out your welcome, so.
Well, I suppose, but I have people in my family that are teachers. They say it takes quite a long time to make a good teacher. Probably takes a long time to make a good police officer too, I imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as you look into the future, what would you like to see be better in the city, and how could the police help to get us to that better place?
Again, many things. The really improving the quality of life as much as we can for everybody, reducing that violent crime, going after the drug. I'm not going to hide from the fact that there is violence in the city. There is a drug issue in the city. Those things need to be addressed.
Yeah.
And
But you say the violent crime is down, right?
it's trending down, right? But it's still there.
It's still there,
Right,
yeah.
so you got to stay on top of it, and hopefully it keeps trending down.
Yeah.
And we want to be, as a police chief and as a police department, we want to be part of the greater community, right? I don't want to just operate in our little sandbox.
Yeah.
And because I firmly believe that we have a role in the overall success of this city.
I certainly think you're right.
Not just me, the great things that are being done at the health department under Anna Thomas.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Under Chief Goon and all these other departments that are doing great things.
Yep.
The highway department, we gotta we're good at it, but we gotta continue to have that outreach to the other city departments and city leaders and, hey, where can the PD help with that problem?
Yeah.
I think if we keep going down that path, that will trickle down throughout the entire department.
Are you basically satisfied with the support you're getting from the governing body of the city for your efforts?
I can't complain, to be honest with you.
Really?
The aldermen have a tough job too.
Yeah.
And not for a whole lot of money, right? I mean,
Right.
if any at all. They, to a man and a woman, they've all treated me fairly thus far.
Yeah.
And when we disagree, we do it privately.
Yeah.
I will never engage in a public feud with any elected official. It just doesn't end well for anybody.
Right.
Nor is that it's not my responsibility to do that.
Very good. Well, Chief, this has been really good to have you here. We had a nice flood of calls. Now we seem to not have any. Anybody who would like to call in, we have a few minutes left. If you'd like to call in, this is a great opportunity to talk with our chief. He's been on the job since, you told me what, Chief, late October?
October 20th.
Well, on the job as chief. You've been on the job a lot longer than
Yep.
that, and I certainly know that.
Yep.
And it's just great of you to come down and join us here. I kind of got that we're answering the topics I was planning to ask you about. But you got anything you would like to offer to our vast viewing public as we wrap this up?
No, I'll just end with, we appreciate, I really believe that the majority of the city supports the police department.
Yep.
And we have a responsibility
Oh,
to,
we have a call.
take it.
We'll definitely. Hey, caller, you just got in time. We're happy to welcome you to the progress report. Got a question or comment for the chief?
Yes, I do. My name is Dave. Hi, Bob. Hi, Chief. Congratulations on your promotion.
Hi,
Thanks,
Dave.
Dave. How are
Commend
you?
you folks in law enforcement. A few years ago, the city of Manchester was threatened with civil unrest, and a lot of law enforcement police agencies came into Manchester and helped out. You guys did a great job.
I appreciate that, Dave. Let's hope we don't have any more.
Yeah. Was that it,
Chief,
Dave?
I'm a fan of the old Adam 12 police show. I just wondered what your view is on how come police officers don't carry nightsticks anymore.
It's an extremely outdated tool. I think we got rid of what you referred to as a quote unquote nightstick when we went to the tasers. That was the replacement for the nightstick, and a taser's a lot more not as intrusive and is far more effective than any nightstick that's out there.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for calling, Dave. Chief,
Okay, thanks for your service, Chief. Thanks, Bob. Bye.
Bye. Chief, I suppose one of the things you'd like to be able to say is when the time comes and you decide to step down from your career, that none of your officers suffered grievous injury or, God forbid, death, and that none of the civilians in the city did either, right?
Right.
I'm sure that's something you'd like to be able to say, that you never had a fatal encounter as a result of police action in Manchester.
Yeah, I mean, you think back to Officer Briggs,
Yes, you do.
Officer Doherty,
Yeah.
that was shot, Officer Hardy, Officer
Yeah.
McGee, Officer O'Connor.
Yeah.
So we've had our fair share, if you will,
You certainly
since
have.
2006. Those are the things that keep me up at night.
Yeah.
The health and wellness of my officers, and that's a call I hope I never get again.
I certainly hope so.
Yep.
Well, again, Chief, it's really been a pleasure for you to come in here and join
appreciate
me,
you
and
having
I
me.
really, really have been very grateful. And I think you can see there's some real interest out there in having you communicate with the citizens of this city, which this is just one way to do it, but
That's
I'm really grateful that you joined us here.
If you want me to come back in the future, let me know.
I will definitely do that. You can count on it. And folks, that'll be it. Next week I'll be on with Senator Lou D'Alessandro, because it'll be the first Wednesday in the month of April, and that's when he joins me. And at this point, we're planning to have a longtime newspaper man, Gary Reno, on and with us. And if that's the way it goes out, I think that'll be an interesting show. And then let me just say, the week after that, something I'm really looking forward to, something I've been pushing. You've heard me talk about this before. This, I think, rather remarkable and interesting and entertaining book called "A Libertarian Walks into a Bear," about the town of Grafton, New Hampshire, written by a guy named Matthew Honglotz Hetling. I have to get that name right. A former reporter with the Valley News. He'll be the author. He'll be joining us, the second week in April, and I think that's going to be a fun show. You ought to check out that book if you haven't. It's not very long, and it's quite a good read. Anyway, folks, thank you very much. Again, thank the Chief. See you next week. Everybody have a great day. Don't forget tomorrow's April Day. Fool somebody on something.